Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and I've decided to make this video a little special this week, as we'll finally be talking about the Sonic franchise on the channel once again. A lot of you guys have wanted to see the Blue Blur make a comeback on the channel, and I can't blame you. Last time I covered him was literally my first video ever, so it's been a minute to say the least. Seeing how this week is Thanksgiving, I might as well give you guys at least one thing to be thankful for this year. So today I've elected to swap Sonic as well as Shadow with Goku and Vegeta respectively. These two duos are more than a little similar, so why not discuss about which duo would do better in the other's shoes? Each duo will get 4 matchups. So for example, for Sonic and Shadow, I will have them face Goku Black / Zamasu, Jiren, Broly, and Moro. And Goku and Vegeta will have to get through Infinite, the Time Eater, Solaris, and the End from Sonic Frontiers. As you guys can see, I've chosen to go with the later villains of each duo. I chose to do that so we could walk away with this video having a good outlook at where each character should currently scale at the moment, as these two franchises are really long, so I don't want to start from the beginning and talk about planetary metas, you know? So we'll start off by talking about each duo, and then we'll talk about each villain one by one, and we'll correlate their AP with what we scaled our duos to be at. But before that, if you guys like the power scaling content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We post weekly videos from Godzilla, Finance, and Freddy's. This is the place you want to be at. But with all that garbage out the way, let's get into the matchup. Before we get into the mess that is Sonic scaling, let's start simple with Dragon Ball once again. This is probably the 4th time explaining Dragon Ball scaling, but it's super simple, so I don't mind summarizing it for some of the new guys here. But basically, during the first arc of Dragon Ball Super, Goku and Beerus threatened to destroy the entire macrocosm, which includes multiple infinite-sized space-times such as Heaven, the Universe, and the Kaioshin realm. These spaces are separated by space and time, and they're referred to as different temporal worlds, and they all have different flows of time. So yeah, they are individual spaces outside of each other that come together to form one massive macrocosm, which Goku and Beerus were going to destroy during the first arc of Dragon Ball Super. It being a shared feat does not matter in the slightest, as Goku would go on to absorb this power into his base. So logically, with all the training and multipliers and new forms he's gotten since then, such as Blue UI and then MUI, it's safe to say that he's a lot stronger than he was during this arc. He should also be stronger than any fraction of power Beerus was using during that time as well. And if you really want to be a goon about it, you can use the anime continuity, which has a bajillion statements saying that tournament of power level characters surpass the gods in their entirety. So for attack potency, we have casual low multiversal scaling, but they should be more than likely multiversal, as baseline multiversal can be argued due to the sheer gap of power between his base and his peak. Like for example, Super Saiyan 3 alone is a 400 times multiplier to his base. Goku has multiple forms that are stronger than this, and then he can stack Kaioken on top of them to a 20 times degree. So yeah, he should be logically multiversal in my opinion. As for Vegeta now, he should scale wherever Goku scales, to be honest, but maybe not as deep into it, but he would be in the same tier nonetheless, as he's shown relativity to Goku in more than one instance, and he's also shown the capability to beat Goku as well. He has forms such as everything Goku has except for Super Saiyan 3, and he has Blue Evolution, and Ultra Ego. See, I almost forgot about that one. But yeah, he should be multiversal as well. As for speed, infinite speed can be argued as far back as Cell and Buu Saga, which if you guys don't know is the ability to travel infinite size differences in a finite amount of time. But this speed really gets solidified during the Battle of God Saga with their shockwaves traveling to these different temporal spaces, so yeah. Inaccessible comes from the manga, where Goku's shown to move in a space with no time during the Goku Black Saga. Immeasurable speed comes from a lot of different instances throughout the show, primarily the Goku Black Saga, but seeing as how I'm already going to talk about him, I'll save that part for later. But to give you one immeasurable speed argument, Goku can fight on par with the really you can travel in time. So yeah, yippee. Once again, Vegeta scales to this as he can hit Goku. See, I told you guys, Dragon Ball scaling is really simple. It's like it's like caveman type stuff. Well, that's certainly one way to describe the past 7 years of Dragon Ball scaling. Alright, now moving on to our 2 Hedgehogs, and instead of talking about attack potency, I wanted to talk about how Sonic and Shadow scale to in relation to each other. This is because a big chunk of this video will be talking about the Rogues gallery in which these guys scale to, so going over it twice would kind of be redundant and ruin the video's pacing in my opinion. But there will be speed metas for this section, so you guys can look forward to that. Now Sonic and Shadow, even post Sonic 06, are confirmed to be relative in all stats, so they would effectively be cemented as equals up until Frontiers, as I have Solaris as the the strongest antagonist until the end from Sonic Frontiers. Trying to gauge Shadow on where he scales in comparison to Sonic is a little tricky to say the least, and this is mostly due to how Sega doesn't really like using him outside of free DLC or one-off lines referencing his presence. But using media outside of the game that is canon to this continuity, we can start to quantify some stuff. In Sonic Prime, which is canon to Sonic Forces and is canon to the current modern continuity, Shadow and Sonic have multiple fights where relativity is established. And honestly, you could get away with saying that Shadow is stronger at this point in time, as he has multiple instances where he gets the better of Sonic. Now, this point in the timeline wouldn't really scale to Sonic Frontiers, so you can't exactly get away with saying Shadow would beat a post-Frontier Sonic, but there is a one-off line where Sonic in Frontier says he wouldn't mind Shadow's help during this game. Using this one-off line, we can infer Sonic himself sees Shadow as a good help for this adventure. So overall, they would be in the same level of attack potency and speed, which we'll start to quantify right now. So how fast is Sonic? And it's Sonic. Bro's fast. Now, I know some people looking at you, Death Battle, who argue that game Sonic isn't even light speed. Now, I'm not going to refute this claim because Goku and Vegeta themselves go anywhere from infinite to immeasurable speed. Me talking about light speed arguments would kind of just be yapping for no reason. So let's skip the baby stuff and get right into immeasurable speed. Now, in Sonic 06, Shadow and Sonic team up to fight a being known as Solaris, who during the fight is noted to exist in the past, present, and future during this fight. So Sonic and Shadow can punch and tag beings that exist in the past, present, and future at the same time. So that should be immeasurable speed right there. To add on to this point, in Sonic Generations, both Sonic are seen to fight the Time Eater, whose whole deal is that he eats time. And during the climax of the game, the Time Eater is stated to fly across time during the fight. In this exact same game, Sonic is stated to restore time and space just by running. And I know some people who like to argue that the context just means that he's going through the levels and restoring the timeline via that, but in a guidebook it's stated that through the power of Sonic's speed, he's able to restore time and space. And for the last immeasurable speed argument, Sonic himself states that he's faster than the flow of time. Shadow scales to this for obvious reasons. So yeah, both of our Hedgehogs should have relative attack potency, and they should both be around immeasurable speed. So with that out the way, we can finally talk about the villains and where they scale. And between the four I chose, I have them in order from weakest to strongest: Infinite, the Time Eater, Solaris, and the End. And I know what some of you guys are saying. Isn't Infinite stated to be the strongest before Frontiers? And yes, I'm aware of this statement, but after researching this particular take, I found a lot of discrepancies with this mindset, so I don't think it's very consistent. Alright guys, this is Goji-Chronic from the future, and I edited an entire section talking about why I didn't think Infinite is the strongest, right? You guys are not going to see that anymore because I found some stuff that refuted all those claims. So yeah, I'm ready to argue that Infinite is the strongest villain up until Sonic Frontiers. Meaning that our updated villain order is the Time Eater, Solaris, Infinite, and the End from Sonic Frontiers. That is the order of villains we'll be using from this point forward in the video. So I guess I might as well explain why I've had such a change of heart. Most of the controversy involving Infinite and his scaling kind of stems from the fact that he lost to base Sonic, whereas past villains such as Solaris and the Time Eater needed multiple Super Hedgehogs to beat them. But Infinite should upscale the Time Eater pretty blatantly, as Eggman perfected the Time Eater by the end of Sonic Generations, and in Sonic Forces he states that Infinite is just stronger than anything he's ever made in the past. And Infinite upscaling Solaris would just come down to the fact that he's just simply fighting a stronger Sonic and base. And speaking about Sonic and base during Forces, I think a lot of us kind of miscontextualize what actually happened in their fight. But before we get into that, I'm going to talk about why Sonic gets stronger by a very massive amount between appearances. In Sonic Generations, he's shown to be able to one-shot Perfect Chaos, a being that Sonic had previously needed his super form in order to beat. Now, I tried to refute this line of scaling because in the same game he fights Shadow, but I made the assumption that this Shadow was actually the Shadow from Sonic Adventure 2. And from there, I tried to explain how it's inconsistent and it could go either way. You know, I was trying to say in one instance he's stronger than Super Sonic, and in another instance he's arguably weaker than himself in Sonic Adventure 2. But by the end of the game, it's stated by Eggman that he flung all of Sonic's friends to these points in time, meaning the Shadow during this boss fight, as ridiculous as it sounds, is just the Shadow we see at the beginning of the game. But continuing to use Sonic Generations for this line of scaling, even classic Sonic is shown to improve drastically between appearances, as he performs better against his boss fights in this game than he did in his own classic games. Alright, since we've established that Sonic gets drastically stronger between appearances, let's re-examine his performance against Infinite, because a lot of people kind of are a little bit disingenuous as to what actually happened. Now, there's three main instances where these guys fight. In the first instance, Infinite kind of wins pretty blatantly, overpowering and speed blitzing Sonic at the same time. Moving on to the second instance now, and people like to use this to downplay Infinite especially. And yes, Sonic does kind of fight Infinite and kind of staggers him, right? I can't even say he beats him after what happens immediately after, which people like to ignore. Infinite uses the Phantom Ruby, like one-shots him, and says he's not even worth killing. And then Sonic immediately after says that he needs to find his weakness in order to beat him, literally verbally conceding to Infinite's power. Keep in mind, this is a Sonic that gets stronger every second and unironically has defeats to back it up, being a one-shot's difference stronger than his Dreamcast Supersonic self. And moving on to the third fight, where Infinite kind of loses definitively, Infinite is weakened and Sonic had help. So I mean, come on, really? And I know some people that argue that Sonic was amped unironically. I'm not gonna go that far, but to use this instance to kind of definitively assert that Infinite is weaker than past villains would kind of just be a little disingenuous, you know? And there's also the statement that the Master Emerald is weak in comparison to the Phantom Ruby, meaning that Infinite should upscale even a hypothetical Super Hedgehog. So in conclusion, yes, Solaris and the Time Eater have probably higher destructive capacity than Infinite, but trying to say that Infinite has no feats, unlike those guys, is kind of useless, as Infinite doesn't want to destroy the multiverse or eat dimensions. He just wants to rule the world. Plus, the lack of any feats like this would just be cancelled out by the fact that he's fighting a stronger Sonic, and is stated to be in the game and outside the game the strongest thing yet, pretty much. All of the anti-feats don't matter, as base Sonic doesn't really scale to Infinite, so yeah, I have no problem arguing Infinite is the strongest villain up until Frontiers. Okay, so with that entire tangent out the way, where do Goku and Vegeta scale in comparison to these villains? So starting off with the weakest of the villains, the Time Eater, in Sonic Generations, the Time Eater is stated to destroy all of reality, but much more impressively, he's stated to be able to destroy space-time, and even erase it, as well as threaten the fabric of it as well. So that would equate to some Universal Plus scaling, but we can argue Universal Plus, as he was going to destroy the classic timeline, the modern timeline, the bad future as seen in Sonic CD, and even Silver's future from Sonic 06. So the Time Eater being able to destroy 4 separate space-times should equate to some low multiversal scaling. Now I think Goku and Vegeta should beat this guy due to them being like solidified into the multiversal tier, whereas the Time Eater only scales to eating 4 universes. Arguably the macrocosm in itself is like 3 universes, so yeah, there's that. So I see Goku and Vegeta playing rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to fight them, and whoever fights them should be able to beat them. And the next person they have to fight now is Solaris, and this is where I see them getting negged, unfortunately. This is because Solaris was going to destroy every single timeline in the Sonic multiverse, which there are an infinite amount of. So Solaris unironically would be infinitely times stronger than even current Goku and Vegeta. Obviously they don't fare any better against the guys who I've established to be stronger than Solaris, such as Infinite and the End especially, but I'll get into his scaling a little later. But as for the topic at hand, how do Sonic and Shadow perform against the Dragon Ball Super villains? Well, if you're able to pick up on the current line of logic, Solaris, an enemy Sonic and Shadow would beat current Goku and Vegeta. Keep in mind, Sonic has gone on to fight arguably stronger characters than Solaris, so yeah, I think that Sonic and Shadow would wash all of these guys like low to mid diff. I can't even really scale them because, like I said before, all Dragon Ball Super scaling just relies on each character upscaling the macrocosm feat from the Battle of Gods arc. So they would just all be different varying levels into multiversal. But as established, Sonic and Shadow should both scale to an infinite multiverse. And going back to Solaris for a second, he stated multiple times to be super dimensional, so stacking that statement on top of an infinite multiverse, Solaris and our 2 hedgehogs by extension would have some 5-dimensional scaling. Now current Sonic also has his cyber form on top of his super form, which showed relativity to the End, who's without a doubt the strongest current Sonic villain at the moment, as he beat the 4 Titans, who are confirmed to be individually as strong as any previous villain. So we have 4 arguably Solaris level characters calling the End unstoppable. This chain is also consistent as the End is able to read into Sonic's mind and see all of Sonic's past adversaries, and he calls them all weak and says that he's infinite in comparison. And yes, Sonic remembers Solaris and the events of 06, so that statement would apply to him as well. And yes, I know Ian Flynn has stated that the End is cocky and arrogant, but the End statements are further backed up in the game, as like I said before, 4 Solaris level characters said that he was unbeatable. Also, more notably, in the recent DLC to Sonic Frontiers, regular Super Sonic can't even damage the End, and Sonic has to resort to getting a new form in order to fight him and damage him. So overall, we have the End no-selling attacks from a logically stronger Super Sonic than the one from 06. Solaris was susceptible to Super Sonic's attacks in that game, so yeah, the End is like in a whole nother league of power, and Sonic at his peak scales to him. So yeah, whatever tier you have Sonic in, whether it be Multiversal Plus or 5D, he would be fairly deep into. Both tiers of Multiversal Plus and 5D are infinitely times stronger than even Zeno from Dragon Ball Super. So in conclusion, we found that Sonic and Shadow would thrive in this environment, while Goku and Vegeta were just too slow.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
If you've made it to the end of the video, I'd like to thank you for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, all that nonsense if you like the power scaling content. We'll be back next week, and remember, happy Thanksgiving.